All right, guys, I want to give you a message recap of the message in our Transform series that I titled The Stone Rejected. We talked about getting back to the centrality of the core beliefs Paul brought up as he's standing before the tribunal there, essentially the religious Supreme Court, that he's there because of the hope of the resurrection. And so he kind of divided the council because he saw that some were Pharisees, some were Sadducees. And so he said, hey guys, I'm a Pharisee. And the Pharisees believed in the resurrection, so he got them on their side, but the Sadducees didn't. The thing about the Pharisees is the Pharisees essentially added to the law to try to make it easier to keep, or actually to keep you far away from actually breaking it. But the Sadducees, they didn't believe in the resurrection and stuff because they essentially took away from scriptures because they only believed the first 5 books. And so they believed everything else was kind of extra, essentially. And so they didn't believe in the resurrection. And so what we talked about is that the resurrection, though, is like an essential, critical belief. And whether you add to scriptures or take it away, either side, it makes it hard to see Jesus. So we want to get back to the centrality of Jesus' death, burial, resurrection. Keep that at the center of our plate. So the resurrection, number one, is a cornerstone belief. A cornerstone is like a stone that you set as you're building a building that essentially aligns all of the other stones that follow. And so when you have the cornerstone of the resurrection, it starts to align everything else from there on out and begin to work out. Instead of the outside working in, we work from the inside out. The second thing is that the resurrection is a keystone belief. You know, a keystone being one of those key things that then triggers other things. So like a keystone habit. If you exercise, put that keystone habit in place, all of a sudden you find yourself eating better, less stress, so on. If you can set the keystone belief of the resurrection, then it tells us some things. It also tells us that Jesus is coming back. It tells us that we've been made right with God. It tells us that I can stand before God clean because he took my place. So it's a keystone belief. And then it's also a capstone belief, which is similar to a keystone, but it's in those arches, in the Roman arches, they'd have a keystone or a capstone stone that would take the tension of both pillars and make the arch actually possible. But if you remove that capstone, then the whole thing would collapse. And so the resurrection is a core belief that if you remove it, everything else collapses. But you have to guard these core beliefs in your life. You know, Paul, he was essentially guarded by 470 soldiers so that he could take the truth to Felix, the governor. And so we have to guard those things on the inside of us because there's the enemy's out there to try to steal, kill, and destroy. And culture is out there to steal, kill, and destroy. So we have to guard the truth that's on the inside of us. How do we do that? Well, one of the ways is very similar to when you're traveling to a different country. Like for Becca and I, we went to Canada. We had to start thinking in kilometers and meters rather than miles and feet. And after being there several days, pretty soon, it just kind of became second nature for us to start thinking that way. And so faith is when you start to think in the measurements and the language of the country that you're going to. Very similarly, if you're traveling far away, they say one of the ways to avoid jet lag is to set your watch to the time zone of where you're going and start to adjust to that time even before you get there. And in that way, living by faith is setting our time, our watch, by heaven's time, our measurements by heaven's measurements, our language to heaven's language, by living by faith even in the here and now, so that it could be dark even in the world and culture around us, but we could be living in the hope and the light of the morning that is to come. And so keeping these core things in front of us, it helps us to realize, just like C.S. Lewis said, that Christianity, if it's true, it's of infinite importance. If it's not, forget about it. But one thing it can't be is just kind of mildly important. And when we keep the resurrection at the center, it becomes infinitely important and worth giving our life to.